Hey everyone, this is Black One with 7 here, and today we'll be going over a Pokemon for our Pokemon Draft League guide slash analysis. So this Pokemon, as you may see, is sort of a trash or just big slime or whatever you want to call it. So I don't know what Game Freak did with it, but between Gen 6 to Gen 7, this Pokemon got an Alolan form or a new form. In this case, this is Alolan Muk, so let's just hop right in to see how strong Alolan Muk is. So, based on its Pokebio, as we see, its base stats are pretty interesting. Its base HP, base attack are 105 each. Special defense is 100. Abilities, he has two really good abilities with Poison Touch, Gluttony, and Power of Alchemy. Power of Alchemy, in my opinion, is a very exclusive doubles ability, so I wouldn't touch on it if your primary focus in singles. You probably want to focus on Gluttony and Poison Touch. So typing wise, it is a Poison Dark type Pokemon, and it gains an additional Dark typing. And with this new Dark typing, it actually gains an immunity to Psychic, which is one of the more interesting things because Poison is weak to Psychic type Pokemon. Poison's weak to Psychic types, and Dark just happens to be very good with it, so it complements it. Though it does lose its resistance to fighting, which keep that in mind once we talk later about it. So its resistances are really interesting. It's resistant to itself in a way. Poison, Dark. It's also resistant to Ghost and Grass, so keep that also in mind. With Psychic, you have a lot of great immunities and resistances. It is weak, however, to one typing, but it's one typing that's really common now. So, and it's essentially ground. So, hopefully, it's a Pokemon that you could probably cover that very well. That's because you're gonna know the coverage in order to kill this thing or beat this thing in general. So yeah. So why draft the Alolan Muk in your teams? Well, for starters, it's a very great defensive Pokemon, as you saw. It's 105. 75 and 100 it's like defenses all across the board. It's really great, and the typing, as you just saw, is fantastic. It's only weak to one thing in its ground typing wise, so other than that, it actually makes the stats make for a great high Spadef wall or just tank in general. And then you have 105 just to base off your attack and you have great coverage options as well with moves like knockoff, jab, poison jab, gunk shot, the elemental punches, and pursuit as well. So, and then you have the fact that you have access or you're immune to Psychic and have 4 natural resistances. It's just really just dicing on the tape because of course you're only weak to ground, but you're probably one of the best pursuit trappers available because none of the Psychic type Pokemon want to take on this thing as well. They don't want to get pursuit trapped. They don't want to get hit by knockoff. They don't want to get hit by anything. They don't want to get toxic or Poison Jab. And speaking of its abilities, Poison Touch is really interesting because it does increase the chance of poison if you make contact. But its other ability is pretty interesting as well with Gluttony, because it's actually one of the few Pokemon that actually has access to Recycle, and you can use Gluttony and the 50% berries in tandem, and not only that, Recycle, and you pretty much get pseudo 50% recovery, which is very, very interesting. Of course you can use this when you have an even number, so that's amazing if you ask me. So you could just keep recycling and it pretty much gives you a recover, and when your opponent attacks you, you just recover back up, so you don't even have to recycle until when you need to do it again, so just to recover back 50%. So, and the best part is that's exactly what I mentioned. If your opponent puts you below 50%, you just recover back up immediately. So that's exactly what makes Muk such a very strong presence. So, and for itself, and it has not only that, it has access to setup options like Curse, Power of Punch, and on support options like Haze, Clear Small, Taunt, Memento. So it's a very great support Pokemon. So you could I wouldn't suggest maybe putting a Z move on it, but you could see where it's coming from. It's a great support option, and of course, as you saw, the resistances, it's honestly one of the best answers to Psychic Ghost, Grass, Fairy type Pokemon. It resists those. Fairy, of course, it's neutral to Fairy, but Muk is a just a strong tank in general. So, in terms of drafting it in an early round and whatnot, I would recommend getting it either probably like third round up to our earliest, or even fourth round if you could like try to snag it. But like anywhere around the middle is pretty much where you could get a Muk. So, anyways, I'll be just going over like covering over the movesets in a bit. So, be right back. All right, so we're back, and right now I have 3 sets for Alolan Muk. Now, 3 of them which I think 2 of which you're probably familiar with, but especially like one of them in particular. We have 3 attacks, or wait, recycle. We have 2 recycle sets and 1 AV set. So, all right, so we'll just cover like recycle gluttony in a bit. So, most of the time, if you're gonna run an offensive Muk, you may want to consider just running like just one with like maybe max attack, near max attack, or just put some options at your defense or like Spadef, depending on the matchups. Now, in terms of like where to EV spread it, or how to do it, you might want to like keep your EV, like your HP value at an even number, so that if your opponent ever uses Super Fang, or where you're just below that mark or your halfway mark, you don't want to like be in a situation where like your 50% berry doesn't activate, like, you know, where there's gonna be Ipapa, Agua. I don't think you want to use Wiki at all, so because I think that one's gonna confuse you for sure. And then also Figgy as well. Well, Figgy is fine. Just don't use Wiki if you're modded. If you're like adamant nature or adamant impish or like careful nature. So yeah. Now, like I said, like in terms of coverage, like you have knockoff, you have poison jab, or like gunk shot, depending on whether you want power versus power versus like accuracy. So, but both of them actually, I believe both of them do have access to 30% chance to like poison. So at least you get that out of the way. And surprisingly, poison jab has a lot more. Oh wow, it has 32 power points. I did not know that. So, I know, and you have like power point value here. So if you ask me, so, and then you have Ice Punch, which you have access to moves like Ice Punch, Fire Punch, even Flamethrower if you ask me. And I think I have access to Thunder Punch as well. Let me see. Yeah. You also have some interesting options as well, such as Taunt, Toxic, and then you have access to priority Shadow Sneak, Pursuit, even Power Punch if you want to go that route. You even have Giga Drain if you, and Focus like Punch as well. So you have strong fighting coverage even with Brick Break. So, and you even have access to Explosion if you want to just go boom. But I think that's more advisable for the AV sets. So, well, which we'll get to. So you have access to Stone Edge as well. So if you want to like hit those flying types. And Ice Punch is always very nice coverage as well, so most of the time you want to like focus on like maybe like Spadef HP or attack, depending on the matchups or situation. So, in terms of other options, I would say outside of like setup, which we'll get to, there's not really much really. Like you may want to put like Toxic or Taunt on like Buck to pretty much ensure that something doesn't set up very easily. So, and yeah, and like be sure to have a cleric with this thing, because of course this thing's gonna get worn down with like status and whatnot. So, with most Muk sets, so we'll cover that when we get to the teammates. So, second set's pretty much AV, and most of the time, this is like you're not gonna be using Gluttony, you're gonna be using Poison Touch as well as your primary ability, which is really nice because with access to Gunk Shot, no, not Gunk Shot, but like Poison Jab, you have around a 51% chance to poison the target. So that gives you really good odds to like, you know, just wear down a target with like not toxic, but like poison damage in general. And with this set, it makes for a great Pursuit Trapper because you have a lot of Spadef naturally. So you have access to Pursuit and Knockoff. You know, you could just decide whether or not you could go for Knock or go for Pursuit. Either of which really nice options against Psychic and Ghost types. So, and the last one is pretty much coverage if you ask me. So whether you want Fire Punch to hit like a certain like a Pokemon like Scizor or Ferrothorn, or you want Ice Punch for something like a Dragonite Landorus T on the Switch, or Thunder Punch for Gara. So, and also Rock Slide if the person has like a Char Y or X or whatever the fuck it is. So, yeah, and then you have Rock Tomb as well. And like I said, you could, if you're very low, you could just go boom, like go without a bang with explosion. So Shadow, you also have access to Shadow Sneak as well. So pretty interesting. So AV said, I would say it's pretty strong. It's probably one of the better AV mons. But just keep in mind that you may want to get a Cleric, just maybe more so a Wishmaster, so just to keep the thing healthy. So last one, the last set is a Curse set. Now this one's more designed to like pretty much be an more WinCon, and the thing about this is that you may have to keep this thing healthy as much as possible. So with Curse, with access to Curse and Recycle, you're just gonna be pretty much recovering up. Like it's pretty much similar to like Curse Lax, but I guess you could say the coverage isn't as strong, but it's still okay because you have access to Stab, Poison, and Dark. So, and also the elemental punches and some okay fighting coverage as well. So you could have access to Knockoff or even Crunch. It depends on what you want. If you're concerned doing consistent damage, you may want to go for Crunch. Maybe push for those defense drops. Like obviously Knockoff is pretty strong in of itself, so removing items is always a good idea. So then you have Poison Jab and Gunk Shot. That's always like a debate there. So Poison Jab is for more power points, I guess you could say. And you have and in this case, I guess you could say you can choose between the elemental punches or like something like Brick Break. So just to get perfect coverage or for something. So you can also have Toxic or Taunt depending on if you just want a mono attacking Muk. But I highly advise it. But it really depends on whether like you have really strong matchups against, and your opponent doesn't have any answers for Muk at all. So, but yeah, and you just have Curse and Recycle. But keep in mind that Curse doesn't have a high value of power points. So, but it's still gonna be good because you're still boosting up your defenses and your attack as well. So you don't have to go with this careful nature spread, max. You could just maybe like have a sort of a running start, just give yourself an attack boost out of nature. If you want to hit certain benchmarks and your opponent doesn't really have the best special attackers and whatnot, so or you just want to add a little bit of defense, that's okay. So and of course you want to keep your HP value as an even number, so that way in case your opponent goes for Nature's Madness, Super Fang, whatever, or you get into that range, you just activate your berry more easily. So yeah, so that's all I have for these Muk sets. So I'll just go into like what partners and counters you have to deal with when dealing regarding Alolan Muk. So yeah. Alright, so for partners regarding Alolan Muk, obviously the big two are Water and Grass type Pokemon. Now, both of these have one thing in common, and the fact that Water type and Grass type Pokemon deal with the ground types. One of Muk's biggest weaknesses, and they're super effective against them. Water types just outright wall them or even threaten them offensively. Same with Grass type Pokemon, but not only that, they resist them. So, try to have it really bulky. Either one or both in terms of having partners for Alolan Muk. Now, Psychic and Fighting type Pokemon are kind of weird because Alolan Muk is kind of like, oh, why we want to have a Pokemon that's sort of like those two as partners. Now, one thing is that like Muk is a very strong Pursuit Trapper, and likewise it deals with like both Psychic and Ghost types. So Psychic types don't often want to deal with each other, opposing bulky Psychics. So they don't really have great options as well. So, and fighting types love like those Psychic type and Ghost types being gone, so they could spam their stab, close combats and high jump kicks and whatnot. So, they appreciate like Muk doing the extra effort and just weakening these guys down. So yeah, and also that Psychic fighting Dark is just a fantastic coverage, like like a type like type core right there. So pivot options are pretty nice because let's say something like a Scizor, Landorus, Mienshao, Rotom, access to Volt Turn, Volt Switch, U-turn, Parting Shot, or whatever, or Baton Pass. Like those options can just help you pivot into Alolan Muk so that you could just, sort of trap them in with Pursue Trap, or Pursue, or either that, or just get in a good matchup in general. So yeah. A cleric option is really, really important when having Muk, because Muk really doesn't have the best way to of feeling itself of its status, especially the AV set outside of like maybe rest, but then you're not running recycle. So and rest isn't the best reliable option in dealing with like Alolan Muk. With you really much want to be able to like chip your opponent down instead of like having to take turns, dealing damage or taking damage and whatnot. So having a Pokemon that can also wish and also have Heal Bell is also nice as well. So Ice type Pokemon are pretty self-explanatory to deal with ground type Pokemon, and just outright threaten like certain Pokemon that just deal with Muk. So, and I think there's not so much I have to say. Like Muk could just wear down Pokemon that like Ice types don't want to deal with. So, and they actually convert offensive core. So, flying types and the levitate users are really nice since they're great. They're immune to I would say ground types, and they have access to, some of them have access to U-turn or Volt Switch in some situations. So yeah, defensive mons are really nice since they could just pair fantastically with Alolan Muk's more like its bulk in general. So having something like a Zapdos or a Rotom or even Celesteela, just like pairing Muk with those three, or something that's just really naturally defensive, will be helpful, just to giving you a good defensive core in general. So and then you have Hatcher supports. Now this one's more so self-explanatory because Muk doesn't really have the best, outside of Curse, it doesn't have the best set of options, and it's not going to be running maybe an offensive like item most of the time. So like like a Poison Barb, or like a Z-move, but you may want to ensure that if you are running an offensive variant, you just have rocks, something that has rocks, maybe some Hatcher, remove like defog, or even spikes in general. So try to get that in mind. So, and then you have wall breakers that go and offensive mons, because I think these go hand in hand, because like as likewise, since Muk is a very slow Pokemon, you want to have something on your team that is very, very fast and just hits incredibly hard, or both. So that's the thing. And for checks and counters, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. Like, Muk is not the best Pokemon in Draft League, if you ask me, in terms of like being dealt with. Like, it's not the something that you want to like you'll be like, oh my god, I can't deal with Muk unless you have a really bad matchup. So of course, number one options are having a ground type and a steel type Pokemon. Both ground and steel types are just gonna be able to chunk Muk, especially the ground types, and they just force it out. Steel types will be able to like either they'll be able to take the knockoffs or whatever. If they have Fire Punch, I think the only one that will be worried about Scizor, but outside of that, they're just naturally defensive. So then you have fighting type Pokemon, which I think, if remember what I said, that like poison types are some poison type, like with the poison you're resistant to fighting moves, but with the dark typing now it's sort of like a neutrality. So these guys could just go in and just pretty much mess up Muk for sure. So they could even set up on Muk. So that's something you gotta be very careful about. Then you have rock type Pokemon, because these guys also have access to Earthquake and are really, really naturally bulky. So they just hit really, really hard. So Muk will not be enjoying any of these Pokemon that are rock types. Dark type Pokemon are really fantastic as well, because they resist like stab dark moves, and they have access to taunt, so that they don't, like, if it's a gluttony Muk or setup Muk, it's just like you'll be able to stop it from going for recycles and whatnot. Then you have Will-O-Wisp, because burning Muk is just gonna help hold them down. So it'll force them to go for your cleric. So if you're able to burn Muk and they don't have any clerics, you just pretty much dealt with it really easily. So then you have knockoff, and I think these three just go hand in hand, like the knockoff, stall breakers, and physically defensive mons. Now knockoff is more so if you have access to Pokemon that just have knockoff in general, like even something like a Clefable, like can have a knockoff and just just make Gluttony Muk just useless. So, and then you can just switch into defensive mons in general, just wall it. So, and of course, stall breakers are some of the best answers to Alolan Muk sets. The ones that are set up, or berry sets, since they just have access to taunt, they just have access to their strong stab options, or just Super Fang, or just some stab option like Hurricane from Tornadus, or Magma Storm, Earth Power for Heatran. So yeah, and then offensive Pokemon, like I said, and wall breakers. These things could just, like, of course, some offensive mons like that are mostly physically inclined, or even like strong on the special side, like Koko, Lopunny, Entei, or even like Kartana could just deal with the Muk very easily. And not only that, wall breakers are probably the biggest threat to Muk, because if they set up on you, you can just set up on them. Either set up with, let's say, Manaphy, or just go for an SD, or just sub, or just better yet, they just outright attack you. They'll have no mercy. So wall breakers and offensive mons are just the best way to handle the Muk offensively. So yeah. And that's all I have for Muk. So overall, I'd say Alolan Muk is just I guess you could say it has more positives than bad, but it's definitely like has its issues. As like if you want like an offensive or like dark or poison type, like either an offensive dark or poison type, you might want to consider like, let's say, Scolipede or like Weavile. However, if you want a Pokemon that's like more defensive, that's gonna help you like be like more of a glue for your team, like I would say consider Alolan Muk. It's space HP, attack, and special defense. It's really strong. It has good coverage options, and it has great abilities to use with Gluttony, Recycle, and its coverage is just, it's good. It's usable. It's pretty much usable. I think the problem with Muk though is that it's somewhat passive. It's predictable, and again, like I mentioned, like it's sort of like a glue, like sort of like having duct tape in a way, but like it's sort of like, yeah, a glue, because it's some Pokemon that could help you against certain matchups, like say the fairies, psychics, ghosts, but at the same time, like it's not gonna be something that's gonna like outright win you the game. So that's gonna come down to using the rest of your other 5 mons. So, and as I mentioned, this thing could be easily chipped down, easily damaged, overwhelmed over time. So regardless, it's one of those Pokemon that I would say give it a try if you have it. So it's a great dark poison type Pokemon, and yeah, it's overall it's okay. If you have to give a rating for this guy, I had to say it would be like a B, or like a B minus, or like somewhere around it there. But it's definitely like one of the better Pokemon to use in Draft League. So, well, anyways, that's all I have for Alolan Muk. So, hope you guys enjoyed this video regarding this guy. So, anyways, I'll be covering another Pokemon in another week or two. So, be sure to like, well, I have nothing to say. So, see ya.